Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show on this 23rd day of August already, 2020. Up first, we've still got the virtual Skywarn weather spotter training still scheduled to take place in 2 sessions for Southeast Alaska. First one, 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, August 26th, and the second one, 2 p.m. Sunday, August 30th, a week from now. And you need to go to online via the GoToMeeting and find this training schedule at weather.gov/AJK/Skywarn and learn about hazardous weather that could impact your area. Or you could become, if you wanted, an official trained weather reporter for the Juneau Forecast Office. And from there, we'll go to fire danger, and only area I could find that had high fire danger, or reached the high fire danger area, was now in the Copper River Basin due to the rainfall. We have a widespread area of rainfall, light rainfall, that came across much of interior Alaska today. And so the only holdout now is the Copper River Basin, and just a matter of time till that's probably gone, and we'll probably ditch the map again for the rest of the season. And from there, go to the hazardous weather graphics. There are no watches, warnings, or advisories out for the Panhandle, southern Alaska. Up north, nothing out in the way of watches, warnings, or advisories. And also for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians and Pribilofs. Another, at least for the next day or so. And satellite imagery showing lots of clouds moving into the central and western part of the state. Still some clear skies holding out, or some sunshine along the upper Yukon River there, Yukon Flats. And locally into the North Waytoka area, a little bit of sun into the Tanana Valley, and then down into the eastern Alaska Range, eastern Copper River Basin. But farther to the south, you can see solid clouds across the Panhandle again, and a couple more bands off to the west and southwest will be moving in, keeping the shower threat in across the Panhandle for the next couple of days, as well as the North Gulf Coast. And some moisture passing by Kodiak. Already seen some clearing in the west-northwest flow following behind one trough. You can see Sand Point in the Alaska Peninsula on the Pacific side. Seeing some sunshine today and clear skies extending up into Shelikof Strait, and that's starting to spread into Kodiak Island. And while on the Bering Sea side, different story, opposite clouds with some light rain. And then on Alaska and the eastern Aleutians, not too bad. You can see some breaks there out to about Atka, and then solid clouds Adak to Kiska, and then Shemya Attu. Looks like they're seeing some clearing skies as well. Otherwise, clouds across the northern Bering Sea, north into the Bering Strait, and then kind of breaks up there over the Chukchi Sea and along the Arctic coast. Looks like some sunshine up over the eastern North Slope, maybe even areas of the Arctic coast today. And otherwise, the clouds pushing into south central Alaska, or the Panhandle, that brought about 0.44 of an inch of rain in the last 12 hours to Angoon, while Petersburg picked up a little over 0.6 of an inch of precipitation. By contrast, about 1/4 of an inch at Juneau. So another wet day there. Drier up toward Yakutat, and isolated thunderstorms developing over the eastern Alaska Range, possibly the Wrangell Mountains, and then northward there to toward Eagle, but very isolated, nothing really widespread. Otherwise, cloudy, cooler temperatures today, and of course with the rainfall, only 0.02 of an inch falling in Anchorage in the last 12 hours. Cordova had about 0.05 of an inch, so pretty light. Some areas had a little bit more there, with flat picking up about 1/3 of an inch over the west central interior, and anywhere from a few hundredths of an inch falling really over Bristol Bay, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta. Some areas saw maybe 1/10 to 2/10 of an inch, but it's kind of a widespread area of light rain and showers, extends all the way up to the western Arctic coast, crosses the Brooks Range there, back down across the Seward Peninsula. Another trough, another surge of moisture coming across St. Lawrence Island and the northeast Bering Sea, approaching the Yukon Delta coast with a trailing edge, very weak trailing edge going down across the Pribilofs. Otherwise, not too bad. Southern Bering Sea, Alaska Peninsula, as we saw, with some breaks there. And the Aleutians, light winds, westerlies, maybe 10 to possibly as high as 20 miles per hour. They had 25 mile per hour gusts at St. George Island. Otherwise, winds pretty light today and fair conditions over the Aleutians. And going to tonight, not much of a change there. Trough makes it to the southwest coast and east of the Pribilof, starts bearing down in the Alaska Peninsula. And lingering isolated showers from Bristol Bay up into the Kuskokwim Valley. And along the Alaska Range, maybe a little more widespread, but not too bad. Areas of rain and showers continue south central Alaska on up into the Mananuska-Susitna Valley, western Copper River Basin, especially the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound area, eastern North Gulf Coast, just a chance of a shower or two. And again, another trough coming in keeps it damp with occasional light rain, fog, or drizzle for the southeast coast. And some showers linger over the White Mountains. Otherwise, the northeast interior, eastern Brooks Range, not too bad. Dry conditions. Showers western Brooks Range into the North Slope. And low clouds and fog, IFR flying conditions along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, westward to the west side, down across the Chukchi Sea, and areas of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And the outlook for Monday, tomorrow, again, cloudy skies and pretty numerous widespread area of light rain, showers, and scattered isolated thunderstorms popping up around the area, one with a trough there. Just west of the Kuskokwim Mountains, or not in the Bethel vicinity, possibly. And then up the Yukon River there, lower east of the Nulato Hills. Chance of a thunderstorm for the Talkeetnas, maybe just a slight risk, but the risk does exist. And also up over the eastern interior, the eastern Brooks Range. And another wet day in store for the Panhandle. Light rain south, showers north, light rain at times for the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula. More of a showery condition, but clearing out over southern Cook Inlet. Just cloudy for Homer to Seldovia and Port Moller with some sunshine. Kamishak Bay down to, again, Kodiak and the south side of the eastern Alaska Peninsula. Bering Sea side, though, with onshore flow, keeps it cloudy with occasional light rain, fog, and drizzle. Another surge coming around that low there just west of St. Lawrence Island. That'll be pushing across the Pribilofs tomorrow night. Otherwise, the Aleutians staying dry with light winds and low clouds and fog. Probably be some clearing as well. So it won't be solid low clouds and fog out there. There'll be breaks in the overcast and some sun breaks like we saw today. Arctic coast fog pulling off the coastline in the afternoon. Chance of showers on the western Arctic coast and North Slope areas. And the outlook for Tuesday, low pressure over the west central interior there, just south of the Yukon River. We'll keep it pretty cloudy and damp all the way down to the Kenai Peninsula. Periods of light rain, Cook Inlet, Mananuska-Susitna Valley. Showers of the Kenai Peninsula, shower chances scattered, isolated, Kodiak Island. And also showers of the eastern North Gulf Coast around Yakutat and Icy Bay. But yet another trough in southwest flow, pushing another round of light rain and fog for the entire southeast coast. Probably a day much like today down there. And again, chance of some isolated scattered thunderstorm activity breaking out over the eastern Alaska Range up into the central Tanana Valley, mainly the White Mountains or mountains north of Fairbanks, on up to the Porcupine River area, upper Yukon, or the Yukon Flats, maybe the southeast Brooks Range. Otherwise, low clouds and fog again, widespread in the Arctic coast and down in the Chukchi Sea, and 1,006 millibar low south of St. Lawrence Island, and a couple of troughs rotating around that, the more significant of the two, from Nunivak Island down to the eastern Aleutians, with quite an area of light rain and fog with that, pushing in toward Bristol Bay and across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Showers for Bristol Bay, and fair with light winds out over the central and western Aleutians. Taking a look at low temperatures for tonight, lower to mid-40s for the Arctic coast and North Slope, as well as the Brooks Range, 40s to lower 50s, mostly in the upper 40s, though, for the areas south of the Brooks Range to the Alaska Range, and upper 40s for the southwest interior, on out to Nunivak Island, near 50 forecast low for the Pribilofs, otherwise mid to upper 40s for the Aleutians, and lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid 50s for the low over the Kodiak Island area. Highs for tomorrow, upper 50s to lower 60s, south central Alaska, mostly lower 60s for the Bristol Bay area. Mid 60s Kodiak Island with some sunshine, and upper 50s to near 60 for the Panhandle, and 65 to 70 for the eastern interior there. Upper Yukon Valley down to North Wyandotte, mid 60s for the Tanana Valley. Lows the following morning near 40 for the Arctic coast, otherwise lower to mid 40s or just in the 40s over much of interior Alaska, lower 50s. Kenai Peninsula and South Central, as well as the Panhandle, followed by highs mid 60s over the interior at the warmest.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, we've got IFR along the Arctic coast into the western Brooks Range, southward to St. Lawrence Island, and then on down to Nunivak Island, marginal for the Pribilofs and Aleutians. IFR, except Shimmy out there, is in the VFR zone, and IFR over Bristol Bay on up into Togiak Bay and the Southwest Mountains. Kuskokwim Valley VFR next extends up to the central and upper Yukon River Valley area, actually over to Eagle, and much of the extreme eastern interior in VFR. Some IFR on the southern slopes of the Alaska Range, otherwise mostly marginal over south central Alaska and the Copper River Basin, with the exception being IFR in Prince William Sound, Gulf of Alaska, and the Panhandle, VFR Kodiak Island. And that holds through Monday afternoon for Kodiak Island there. Some marginal VFR may show up down there around Sitkinak Island, but the remainder of the area looking pretty good. Marginal VFR eastern Bering Sea, Bristol Bay, inland areas of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, St. Lawrence Island, IFR just west of the Pribilofs down to the central and western Aleutians. And we've got IFR mostly just off the Arctic coast, so call it marginal up there. Some VFR over the central and eastern North Slope. Brooks Range looks a little marginal. VFR for the central and eastern interior. South of the Alaska Range, though, mostly marginal VFR, but Cook Inlet on down to the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay VFR. IFR along the North Gulf Coast Range there. It becomes more widespread from Cape Yakataga to Yakutat and over the northern Panhandle. And for Tuesday morning, we've got IFR again. Now, just onto the Arctic coast, marginal VFR across the North Slope to the Brooks Range. And then south of the Brooks Range there, VFR across the Kobuk, Koyukuk, and upper Yukon valleys. In fact, it looks like VFR right on down the Yukon River there until you get out toward the Delta. But Norton Sound and Alato Hills and marginal VFR. And areas of IFR over the northern Bering Sea and IFR from Unimak Island westward to Shimianatu with marginal VFR from Alaska Island across the Alaska Peninsula. And along and south of the Alaska Range, areas of marginal VFR with some scattered areas of VFR. It stays pretty good, Cook Inlet and Kodiak Island. And then the eastern North Gulf Coast, Wrangell Mountains, eastern Copper River Basin, IFR, right on down the southeast coast to Dixon Entrance. And for Tuesday afternoon, again, the IFR pulls off the coast up there along the Beaufort Sea coastline with marginal VFR hangs in over the north slope to the Brooks Range, stays VFR south of the Brooks Range, and some VFR showing up along the coastal areas of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And IFR now just up to about Adak and Amchitka, marginal VFR for the remainder of the Aleutians, and IFR for the eastern and northern southeast coast. Passes, Anatuvik, marginal, same forecast for Adigan, marginal VFR, marginal VFR for Lake Clark and Merrill as well. Rainy looks marginal, as does windy and Isabel, but Mentasta should stay VFR throughout the day tomorrow, and Tanita, marginal VFR at times. Portage IFR at times, and Chilkoot and White, solid IFR. Freezing levels, not much change from yesterday, about 8,000 feet over the southeast coast and 6,000 feet along the west coast, slopes up a little bit to 8,000 feet over the eastern interior. A little bit more of a gradient there over the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians, going from 6,000 to 12,000 feet. And for icing, quite an area of potential icing there in the shaded areas of the mostly isolated light or just barely isolated moderate varieties. With several surges of moisture coming in, and one down over the southeast coast. Could be some areas of considerable moderate, but not too many there over the Alaska Range and back up toward the northern Kobuk Valley areas. And for the jet stream, southwest flow, again, pushing that moisture in. We've had a split in the jet along the eastern Bering Sea and the west coast. That's shifting eastward. And so the southwest flow will be coming eastward as well. And they'll continue to push moisture and rain and clouds into interior Alaska. 9,000 feet, again, southwest flow turning southerly over the Bering Strait. Again, the whole pattern shifting slowly eastward. And for 3,000 feet, same pattern. Not much in the way of wind. Still pretty light over the interior, but increasing subtly in southwest flow from west to east over the next day or so, increasing the moisture. And as far as turbulence goes, not too much to speak of. Pretty light winds. Prince William Sound to Cordova, below 4,000 feet. Light to isolated moderate chop also for Chimay at 2.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens of GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us again tonight.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks, Eric. And we've been talking about the complex gathering of information from satellites, looking down on the surface of the planet. And some of those orbits around the planet work for Alaska, and some of them don't. There's a lot of challenges with those. How can we get better imagery for the poles and specifically for Alaska?
Right. Well, today we're going to talk about a very interesting kind of satellite orbit that has potential to be real helpful for the high latitudes.
Okay.
Especially us here in Alaska. Canadians, Russians, Norwegians will all be interested in this. The satellites are not in orbit yet. Now the future is uncertain, but it's possible, and if this happens, it will be wonderful for Alaska. Okay. It's called the highly elliptical orbit.
Oh, that sounds
it's interesting. Yeah. And I think first, to help our discussion, we should get back to some of Kepler's laws and how do satellites work.
Sure.
Kepler's first law, an orbit of a planet around a sun or a weather satellite around the Earth is not necessarily a circle, it's an ellipse.
Okay.
And the highly elliptical orbit takes advantage of this aspect. We're going to put the Earth in one of the ellipse and then stretch one of the foci of the ellipse and then stretch that ellipse out real far to make it highly elliptical.
The foci is that bend part of the end of the ellipse. If you're going to stretch out a rubber band, that would be the center, kind of the stretchy part.
Yes.
Ends. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then Kepler's second law says that the closer something is to the thing that it's orbiting, the faster it goes.
Okay.
We see this in the solar system, that Mercury flies around the sun real fast. Jupiter, much slower. Jupiter's further away, it's slower. Mercury's closer in, it's faster. This happens with weather satellites too. Even satellites like the International Space Station, it's pretty close to the Earth. It goes around the Earth in only 90 minutes.
Okay.
That thing is moving. It's only 250 miles away. So how can we take advantage of these two aspects of Kepler's laws of motion to get better weather surveillance of Alaska? And this highly elliptical orbit is going to be the approach. So we have with us today our friendly planet Earth and our simulated satellite, the lid off of this salt shaker
like
here.
Sputnik there. Yeah.
There it is. It's shiny, it's metal, it's space worthy. And what we want to be able to do is, could you have a satellite hover over the top of the world, up over Alaska? You can't really do that. Geostationary satellites have to be over the equator.
Okay.
So how could we almost solve this? And this is the tricky part. Maybe should we tilt the Earth over?
Focus on the pole. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, right?
So here we have the northern side of the planet, and we're going to trace out the orbit of a satellite with this salt shaker lid here. Now imagine a highly elliptical orbit. So let's put the Earth in one of the foci of the ellipse, and we'll have an imaginary foci out here. So the satellite will not go in a circle around the Earth, but will be in this long strung out ellipse. So the satellite will go...
Kind of like a racetrack.
Yes, there you go, like a racetrack. So it's an oval elliptical shape like that. And notice now that when the satellite's over here, we've got a nice view of the northern hemisphere around. There's Alaska, Russia, Canada, Greenland, all there. So that's the ellipse aspect of an orbit, Kepler's first law. The second law saying that when you're further away as a satellite, you go slower. And this we can take real advantage of. Because the way this orbit works, when the satellite goes over Antarctica here, it's going to be close to the Earth. It's going to be moving, whoosh, goes on by. And then as it comes out here, it will slow down This increases what is known as the dwell time. The satellite will just hang here looking for hours at Alaska and the high Arctic. And then eventually it will come around and it will accelerate and whiz around the South Pole and then come back and hang here for a while because it's further away from the planet. It goes slower. It has to. That's the laws of motion. And such like that, repeating.
Wow.
Now the real important way to make this work is you have to have two satellites. So that while one is whipping around the pole, you've got the other one out here, and they work as a team. You could then get a series of images of Alaska that can be almost from a constant frame of reference, and you can loop them together to make movies. You can take a picture every 10 minutes, say, of Alaska, and then loop it, playing it at several frames a second. You could see the clouds whiz on by. You know, the Weather Channel, weather broadcasters in the lower 48 especially can show these movie loops from the geostationary satellites. In Alaska, we've never really been able to do that very well, especially in the higher, most northern parts of the state, because those geostationary satellites are over the equator. It's not a good view. And this highly elliptical orbit whipping around the South Pole and then dwelling up here would be a way for us to get that constant frame of reference and do really good weather surveillance over the Arctic, seeing where those storms are, where they're going. Nothing quite like a movie loop of the weather in time to really illustrate what's important, what's going on.
And compared to what we have right now, we just have small windows or snapshots of what's going on with the polar orbiters. We don't have that long range view that's looking top down to give us that complete motion picture that helps us understand so much of the atmosphere at this
There's
point.
so many different kinds of satellites. Each has their advantage. Each is important, and the highly elliptical orbit satellite will also fit into that scheme. It's a nifty idea to solve an Alaskan challenge.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds really exciting. And again, kind of a satellite dream of the future to come. Okay, very good. Thanks for joining us today, Eric. We really appreciate the information. And if you'd like to learn more about what Eric does at Dehne, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we invite you to visit the web address that you see on your screen there. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, not a lot different from yesterday. There's still a fair distance off the coast, all the way across. So clear sailing there along all of the Arctic coast into the Mackenzie River Delta. And not much change expected over the next few days. Coastal water forecast on the south coast. For the Panhandle on the south coast, southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, seas at about 4 feet. Light winds also in store for the north coast out of the south and southeast, 10 to 15 knots and seas at 4 feet. Lynn Canal, southeast winds 15 knots with 3-foot seas, and 10-knot winds for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. Outlook for Tuesday, a little bit more of a breeze there for the central and southern inside waters, as well as Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay, all southerly at 15 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. Light winds on the south coast out of the west at 10 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas, and a little breezier up north, southwest wind at 15 to as high as 20 knots with 6 foot seas. For Cook Inlet, southwest winds tomorrow 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas. Prince William Sound northeast at 20, sustained with 4 foot seas, southeast 20 knots there for the eastern North Gulf Coast. And the western North Gulf Coast, west winds of 15 knots northwest winds of 15 knots increased to 20 knots there for the Barren Islands with 3 to 4 foot seas. And then for Tuesday, for Cook Inlet, southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas. Kamishak Bay, westerlies at 15 knots, and west 20 knots for the Barren Islands. And for the western North Gulf Coast, winds will be out of the west at 15 knots, seas at about 5 feet. Prince William Sound, light northeast breeze at 10 knots with 2 foot seas, and eastern North Gulf Coast, southerlies at 15. Kodiak Island, west-northwest, 20 knots, seas 5 feet. The Alaska Peninsula, west winds at 15 knots with 5 foot seas, and for Bristol Bay, west 15 with seas at 4 feet. Moving on to Tuesday, no change for Bristol Bay, westerlies of 15 knots with 4 foot seas. And from Cape Saracheff to Sitkinak, winds will be out of the west, 15 knots with 5 foot seas. West winds at 20 knots with 5 foot seas for Kodiak Island. And the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, winds will be west at 20 knots with 6 foot seas. For the area from Kiska to Shemya, winds will be southwest at 20 knots tomorrow. And for Amchitka Island, they'll be west at 20. Adak and Atka, lighter, westerlies, 15 knots, 4 to 5 foot seas. And for the eastern Aleutians, west winds at 15 or 10 to 15 knots with 5-foot seas. A little bit, that increases a little bit up to 20 knots out of the west for the eastern Aleutians, with seas running 6 to 8 feet. West-southwest 15 to 20 knots for Adak and Atka. And from Amchitka to Shemya, winds will be west at 15. For the southwest coast, Monday, looking westerly there south of Nunivak Island in toward Kuskokwim Bay at 15 knots with seas running right around 5 feet. And out toward the Pribilofs will be southwest of 20 knots with 6-foot seas. Also southwest of 20 for St. Matthew Island and the Yukon Delta coast, southwest 15. Norton Sound, southwest 15 with seas at 3 feet, but St. Lawrence Island, southwest of 20 with 4-foot seas. And for Tuesday, for Norton Sound, light southwest wind at 10 knots and 3-foot seas, about the same for St. Lawrence Island. And the Yukon Delta coastline, southwest at 10, seas 4 feet. Southern Nunivak Island, southwest at 15 for the Pribilofs, west at 20, seas 6 feet. St. Matthew Island, winds will be northwest at 15 knots. And for the Beaufort Sea coast on the east side, west-northwest, 5 to 10 knots, pretty light winds with seas running 1 to 2 feet. Central coast variable to northeast at 5 knots with 1 foot, seas at 1 feet, pretty slight. And for the western Arctic coast, westerlies at 10 knots and 2-foot seas. Wales to Cape Beaufort, southeast at 10, seas 2 feet. So pretty light winds in store for that whole area on Monday. And that continues into Tuesday as well. Becomes a little more uniform in direction there from Wales up to the, say, Point Lay area, northeast at 10 with seas at 3 feet. Central coast, north at 10, seas 3 feet. And the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north to northeast breeze at 10 knots with 3-foot seas. For tonight, again, light rain and showers south central Alaska up into areas of the eastern interior. Stays wet over the Panhandle, and a trough keeps unsettled damp conditions and IFR into the Yukon Delta coastline, and that'll be approaching Bristol Bay tomorrow. Cloudy and wet with scattered isolated thunderstorms, showers, areas of rain over just about all of interior Alaska, especially the central and western portion down to the North Gulf Coast. And the outlook for Tuesday, more of the same, except a little drier for the North Slope.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.